Well, the foot pursuits are one thing. The car pursuits are a whole nother thing.
Agreed.
Like, and the guys talk about this. The team talks about this on the Finest Unfiltered all the time. Bad policies across the board, across the country. They're allowing these any agency that's allowing these things to go on. Too many innocent people are getting killed, and especially, I guess, from the three of us. Well, our perspective is I was taught detectives walk, they don't run. Don't worry, we're going to catch them. It's okay. The only question is that person an imminent threat right now to hurt somebody? And, that's a tough decision and call to make. But on the other side of it, as the detectives, like, let them go. We got the information. We got the license plate. We got it. We're going to get them. We're going to get them.
Also, especially today, and Tommy's an expert at this, but the technology today, you can't leave your house without leaving a digital footprint. It is impossible. It is impossible. And also, as a result of that, it's never been easier to catch a bad guy because these idiots are putting everything on Facebook, YouTube, all social media, which we didn't see, and I hate to sound like that guy, but back in my time, but right, the society evolves, right? Our industry evolves, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, right? What concerns me is, and right, Pete's got and Tommy's got young kids, social service, right? Public service is an admirable profession. You're not going to get rich. If any young kids are watching this, you're not getting rich doing this, right? But you have a front seat to the best show in the world. And it's a meaningful life, and it's an impactful life. And I encourage all young people to at least keep looking into public service, whether it be a cop, a federal agent, a nurse, a teacher, what have you, right? Working in government. It's an honorable thing to do, and it's a hell of a lot of fun.
So, Carlos, when I was on the Finest Unfiltered about 7 or 8 months ago, I said the same thing, and they asked me if I would go back on the NYPD again, and they said I was the only retiree to come back and say I would. And it's not specifically the NYPD I really, and I have a son that's got 7 years on a job in Washington, D.C., 6 years, I guess, 6 years in Washington, D.C. He's doing a great job. He loves it. But, we worry about it. I think what has to happen is the agency, you have to be sure the agency and the city's administration have their backs. Because, yes, everything you're saying is true, but what also has to happen is the agency that you go to, you have to know that you get the benefit of the doubt. You should be allowed to make an honest mistake where your heart is in the right place. Things happen. This is hand-to-hand combat. It's a contact sport, as the guys say.
Yeah.
But if it's not criminal intent, like, you got to get backed.
But Tommy, the problem nowadays, so many police chiefs have no business being in policing. So many police chiefs out there today now have drank the perf Kool-Aid, and they're politicians. They're not police chiefs. I mean, when we cut our teeth, most people that promoted to those ranks were out there and did the job and did it for decades before they wound up in those jobs. So they could, they walked the walk that you're now walking. I mean, they saw things through the same, lens that you're seeing it. Nowadays, these police chiefs now, half of them have no business being in law enforcement. And that's the unfortunate part. Look, I'm not saying the police should be out there brutalizing anybody. You need to be incredibly fair. But at the same time, you need to know what needs to be done to keep people safe. And allowing people to run away from you or, having these soft on crime policies, don't do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So listen, let's get back on track and wrap up the Minnesota shootings. The Hortman's dog, Gilbert, a golden retriever. Not only is it a dog, but it is a golden retriever, which I happen to have 2 golden retrievers. And Pete, I hear loud and clear what you say, you like dogs more than people. Well, you probably like golden retrievers more than all dogs, and then all dogs more than people. But This really made me sad, and in a very, very nice tribute and gesture to the dog and the Hortman family, they let the dog lie in state at the Capitol with his parents, the parents. So a little sidebar on Gilbert. So rest in peace, Gilbert. Let's get into Carlos, guys. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Carlos, tell us, about your upbringing and, what made you decide to go into law enforcement.
Hey, before I start, right? See that picture? Pull up the Paul Blart Mall Cop and tell me that there's not a resemblance. Anyway, so yeah, I grew up in a place called Watertown, Massachusetts, just outside of downtown Boston, about 6-8 miles outside west of downtown. I was a criminal justice major. Well, let me go back. I wanted to be an education major, so I went to Central Connecticut State University for a year. I decided that I wanted to be in law enforcement. Central Connecticut did not have a criminal justice program, so I transferred and I went to a small little state school in Western Massachusetts called Westfield State College, otherwise known as the Harvard of Western Massachusetts. They got a great criminal justice program. I think 6 or 7 Massachusetts state police colonels, head of the Mass State Police, or all Westfield grads, either undergrads or master's degrees, but it's got a great criminal justice program. And so that's where I went. I graduated in 1980. There you go. I graduated in 1988, and it took me a couple of years to hook on with somebody, and I happened to hook on with ATF. I was hired out of Fort Lauderdale, and they sent me to my first post of duty was in Yakima, Washington, a 2-man office, satellite office. I worked with a great guy. His name is Bob Wyatt. He passed away in retirement as a result of a motorcycle crash, injuries from that crash. But it was just me and Bob. It was awesome, right? Our supervision was in either Seattle or Spokane. It was just, and Bob was in between marriages, so it was just we worked literally 7 days a week. It was awesome. It was the best training experience I could get. And then I went to LA in the early 90s, 1991. I went to LA in 1991.
You worked with the Rampart guys there, didn't you?
Right. I was assigned an LAPD gang unit, which was Rampart. It was called CRAS at the time, Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums. And so I worked with uniformed crash guys, and I worked with crash detectives, homicide detectives. And it was talking about going to school, great training. And people don't remember this. In the early 90s, LA had a gang war going on. And it was, you guys were NYPD cops, so I'm not telling you it's something you don't know, but it was wild. LA was wild. I was there for the LA riots, the Rodney King riots, the Northridge earthquake, you name it. It was talking, a 26-year-old kid running around with his hair on fire, where the rule book wasn't as thick as it is today. Right. So, and I got lucky because I had a lot of seasoned, were they gang cops, street cops, homicide detectives, older agents. They kind of all took me under their wing and kind of brought me along, right? They were very patient with me, right? I'm not the most patient guy in the world.
No, not you, Carlos.
Right? I was immature 26. I'm an immature 60-year-old. So imagine at 26 with a gun and badge and, frankly, not a lot of supervision. Great training ground, which came into play years later when I had executive positions at ATF, and when I sat on different boards and stuff like that. I always think of myself, and I told Pete this when he and I worked in Miami. I've always thought of myself as a GS. I started out as a GS5, right? I happened by accident to make it to the senior executive service, but I've always thought of myself as a GS5. I never, literally to the day I retired, which was January 30th of 2020, I never was comfortable. I never felt comfortable. I always thought that I wasn't doing good enough. Someone was going to figure out that I was play acting. That was literally every day for 30 years. I don't know if that's normal, but I never felt that I was good enough, right? And I was always trying to do more, trying to be better, always trying to do the right thing. Sometimes I did that. Sometimes I failed miserably, but it always came from a place of trying to do good things, right? It was never with malice. And it was funny, every time, I remember when I got promoted to be a supervisor, I sent an email to every supervisor that I had prior to that, right? And I became a supervisor late. I had 15 years on the job before I became a supervisor, but I sent them an apology email when I first became a supervisor, right? Because now you see things from a different perspective. But it was good.
Before you promoted, brother, you moved around the country a little bit. I know you did some time in Puerto Rico, you did some time in Miami, so that folks can get a little perspective on, the breadth of your experience. If you could touch on some of those, and then maybe I know these folks would be chomping at the bit to hear about some of the undercover stories that you had before we even get into Fast and Furious stuff.
Yeah,
so I have a question, Carlos. Hold on, but I have a question before you get into your stuff. So since you've been East Coast, West Coast, South, even a possession of the United States of America, is there a difference between East Coast policing and West Coast policing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely there is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what?
The West Coast, they're robots.
East Coast policing is more traditional, more parochial. West Coast policing is a lot more cerebral. But then again, though, right? Hey, man, I tell you what, I worked with LAPD in the early 90s. Those guys were some good street cops, right? Those guys got after it. So my first 15 years on the job was Yakima, Washington, Los Angeles, Miami, San Juan, Puerto Rico. That was my first 15 years on the job. And then I was promoted to a GS group supervisor position in St. Louis, where that's those 4 years in St. Louis as a group supervisor, St. Louis Group 2. That's the most fun I've ever had. And I've had some cool jobs at ATF, and I've done a lot of cool stuff. My 4 years as a first-line supervisor in St. Louis, that was the best time of my ATF career. By hand.
I believe they're east of the Mississippi, right?
Yes. No,
There
they're
you
west.
go.
I don't know.
There you go.
I don't know. No, they're east of the Mississippi because the Arch.
Yeah,
the
So they're west of the Mississippi, but they're on where is that sit?
Yeah. The city's east. Yeah, the Arch is the gateway to the west. It sits on the east bank of the Mississippi.
You've just watched a clip from our live episode. Click the description to watch the full episode. Like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this.